All right. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for showing up at 5 o'clock in the evening Eastern time with all of us. My name is Erin Kong, and I am the Director of Field here. And welcome to the Introduction to Field Education webinar. This is the webinar for those of you who will start a field. It'll be first term field next term, or sorry, in 2 terms, in spring, summer 26, because you'll have to apply next term in the winter term. If you are, it says here on campus and local online. Some of you may be out of state or well past an hour from Ann Arbor. Our online team should have already been working with y'all. So this actually doesn't apply, like you're already in the process. So you're welcome to hang on this meeting. But this meeting is specifically to folks that are typically about an hour from Ann Arbor, both in the online and the on-campus programs that helps to clarify for y'all. Okay. Here is our agenda today. We'll do some introductions. I'm not going to read this all to y'all, but essentially I'm going to go over the functions of applying for field expectations. Some people have lots of questions around employment-based placement. Sometimes you have questions around the school social work specialization. Again, I have 2 esteemed colleagues on this call that will answer and ask or provide some additional information for y'all. And then, like I said, we'll stop recording and we'll answer any other questions that you might have around the field process. And so with that, let's do some formal introductions. Like I said, my name is Erin Kong. I'm the Director of Field. I've been in this role now. This is my 3rd year. My background is in healthcare. I worked in healthcare for about 20 years before I moved into this role. And I'm also a clinical professor here, so I teach a couple classes. Cerise, would you like to go next?
Absolutely. Welcome, everyone. My name is Cerise Carrington, and I am the Assistant Director of Financial Aid here in the MSW program. So I work in our Office of Student Services and Enrollment Management. I'm also a part of our admissions review team. So if you have not already connected with me regarding financial aid, we likely have connected just from an admission standpoint. So I'm happy to be here to answer any questions maybe that you all have as it relates to field placement and kind of Office of Student Services related issues or any financial aid related implications for your field placement. So,
Thank you. Thank you. And Michelle?
Nice to see everyone this evening. So, my name is Michelle Woods, and I'm the director of our Career Services Office. And we primarily help our MSW students with reviewing your documents. Just as you prepare for your job, we help you prepare for field placement. So, there are a couple of documents that you have to submit as part of your application, and you can have them pre-reviewed by our office. And we also answer a lot of questions regarding licensure. So, questions you have about practicing in Michigan, out of state, all of that we can answer in prep for your field placement. So, thanks for being here tonight.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for taking extra time into your evening to join us. All right, so we're going to get started. I do like to do some introductions overall of the field education teams. The Office of Field Education is one of the larger groups here at the School Social Work because we are 25% of the curriculum. We have 2 assistant directors. Professor Dadswell is the residential assistant director, and Dr. Robinson is the online assistant director for those of you in the online program. We have an amazing administrative team, and I'm hiring. I actually just hired a new colleague this week, so we'll get their name up there. Their name is Chi Tran, and Sarah and Claire are also part of our amazing team. Claire actually works with those students that are out of state, and she helps with a lot of the placing. And then these next few slides are field faculty. And one thing I forgot to mention is these slides are formatted to be digitally accessible. So we make sure that the font is big enough and that the color contrast is there. And so if you're wondering why I didn't try to squeeze more in, it's because we want to make sure that these are digitally accessible for everybody because we're going to send these out. So the next few slides are our field faculty team. And when you think about field faculty, these are folks who will be eventually assigned. They are assigned by agency. And so when you land into a field placement, these will be, one of these people will be your person for all intents and purposes. They will be your instructor on record. They will be your go-to if you have any questions around field education, if you have questions about supervision or connection to the competencies. These are the folks that are your go-to. And most importantly, these are the folks that you're going to register under field for in the specific section under field. So we have an amazing team of field faculty members here. A lot of people, I won't belabor this, but I do want to, of course, make sure that I tell you what field education is. So as I mentioned before, it's 25% of the curriculum. This is the experiential portion of your MSW curriculum. Our main goals is to make sure that we're connecting the things that you're learning in class into a real world situation and field, and that you're having those aha moments to connect your competencies and your skills and having in a supportive space to practice those things. Our main goal is to make sure that you have transferable skills in a field placement that aligns with your primary pathway. I'll say some more about expectations and managing expectations for field, but really those are the main things from an accreditation perspective, is just making sure your field placement aligns with your primary pathway. We care very much about folks who want to do other things, but for field and accreditation purposes, secondary pathways and special scholarships, we work with those other spaces, but the primary goal is to make sure that your primary pathway is taken care of. As far as your field team, sometimes we get some questions around this, so I just want to define this. The pictures that I put before is the U of M School of Social Work field faculty team. Again, those are the people you're going to register for. But then you're also going to have someone think about it, at your site, at your field agency, and we call those the agency field instructors. Those are the people that are going to give you your tasks every day or every week. They're going to be essentially evaluating you on your performance and your projects. They're going to be giving you maybe client lists or projects or policies to work on. These are the folks that are going to be giving you all the tasks to do all the things to meet your educational goals. And then the last person is optional. So sometimes there are placements where we have what's called a task supervisor. It can actually be a secondary MSW field instructor that's involved in your learning, but it also can actually be an integral person to your learning that's not an MSW. So I've had some interprofessional clinics where the psychiatrist or even a clinical psychologist is listed as your task supervisor because they provide so much learning and so much mentorship and teaching. But because they're not an MSW, we need to make sure for accreditation purposes that you have a qualified MSW field instructor. And so you might have multiple people involved in that space. Okay, just a little bit about field hours and credits. So I hyperlink this, and again, we'll send out these slides once the recording's available as well. I hyperlinked your course planning worksheet. As long as you follow your course planning worksheet, or if you meet with one of our program managers, Kate Seckler or Antoine Featherstone, and they make you a new one, which we'll be aware of, follow your course planning worksheet because that will outline when and how many semesters you're supposed to be in field. And I'll show you some more information about that in a second. As far as field hours, though, basically foundation field, here's kind of the conversions, if you will. You're going to take 2 credits of foundation field if you do not have a bachelor's in social work. If you're non-advanced standing, you're basically going to have to do foundation field. If you already have your bachelor's, you don't have to take foundation. And so we just want to make sure that you understand the total credits and what the hours means. A lot of people ask me, what does this mean for how many days I have to be in field? And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a future slide. The total number of hours that you have to do as a non-advanced standing student is 900 hours, and that is dictated by our accrediting body. That is a minimal number of hours that you have to complete. For those of you who have a bachelor's level, again, you're advanced standing and you'll do 672 total hours, and that's over all the semesters, not in one semester. And one thing I'll just say for those of you who maybe are planning to practice in another state afterwards, and maybe even Director Woods can say this, some states have requirements around extra hours, but you have to come to us and let us know that because we don't necessarily know that. And so if you need extra field hours, we can work with you to increase your field credit hours. But standardly, this is kind of the minimal requirements if that's what you need. Director Woods, do you want to say anything
Right.
else about that?
Yeah, that's correct. And I have on my part of the website, and if you go to the career services page, and it has a section on licensure and test preparation. And in there is a chart where I have listed each state and the licensing requirements for each state if there are additional circumstances regarding to that state's rules and regulations. For instance, if there are specific type of courses that you need to take while you're in the MSW program, and if there are any specific requirements regarding field placement, like where you need to be placing your field placement and how many hours. And if you have any questions about that, you can always reach out to me. We don't have on there international. So if any of you are thinking about like the United Kingdom or Australia, they may require additional field placement hours. So if you're interested in that, reach out to me and I can work you through how many hours that might be. in addition to the 900. But the 900 hours is mostly standard hours for CSWE and a lot of state licensing boards. If they have a designated amount, we'll say 900 or more hours.
Thank you so much. We're so lucky to have Michelle Woods and her team in the Career Center. So thank you so much for doing all that and keeping all that up to date. It's so much. So one other thing that I'll say, and I think it's in a future slide, but I'll say it now. When you look at Foundation Field, for those of you who have to do that, when you consider that you're going to have to register for 2 credits, and this is what I try to put it down here, 228 hours over 14 weeks of field, I want you to plan on essentially 16 and a half hours per week. So just so you can think about it, it's 2 days a week. And then for those of you who are advanced standing, or for those of you who will just continue on into your next terms, usually what you'll do is Foundation Field 2 days a week, and then the following terms for the rest of advanced field are 3 days a week for those of you who are full-time. For those of you who are part-time, you're going to be 2 days a week field just consistently over 4 terms. We just kind of spread out your field, if that makes sense for you part-timers. Okay. As far as the placing timeline, I get some questions around this. These are important dates. So again, I'm going to send you the recording and I'm going to send you these slides, but I would put these in your calendars. You're going to get an email in your UMich email. So please make sure that you're checking your UMich email and not any other personal emails. On January 12th, you'll get an email from my office that says, congratulations, field applications are open for spring summer term. Please click on this link and it'll take you to the field application and that will walk you through it. It will be open essentially for 2 weeks and then it will close promptly. So just make sure that you find some time to set aside to look through the field application. There is no advantage or disadvantage to submitting your field application on the first day versus the very last day. The only thing I would tell you is don't wait until the very last minute on the last day. You're going to feel stressed. And also, you don't want to get to midnight, it shuts you off and all the things. But again, I just want to stress, if you apply on the first day, that's okay. But if you apply on the second week, it's totally fine because you're not going to be disadvantaged. So we also, between the times while the field application's open, I've hyperlinked it there. We're updating the website as we speak. There are things called field office placing drop-in Zoom sessions. And so we offer these every day throughout that time period to allow you, you don't have to make an appointment, just come in, hop on the Zoom with us. And we have field faculty assigned every single day to answer questions that you might have about field app navigation or field sites, anything that you have field application related. We have drop-in sessions every single day. So you're welcome to join us for those. And then the field applications due on the 23rd. We do if we need to. We hopefully we won't have to, but if anyone doesn't turn it in on time, we will follow up with you for the next week. And then after that, there needs to be a cutoff date by which we're going to have to move on. And so I really don't want anyone to be disadvantaged or have to push their entire field schedule to another term, because that's going to delay your graduation and it may have financial aid implications or cost implications if you bump that. So please, if I could just impress upon you today to try to turn in your field application on time, that would be helpful so that you get a response in a timely manner. Here's the placing timeline. So you're going to apply. It'll take a couple weeks to get through that. And then our team needs a couple weeks to go through all your materials. And I'll go through what those materials are. But by February 6th, you should have heard from someone in this office sending you to your first option. So we'll look through, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like. But you're basically going to give us some idea by ranking the top 3 that you see on there. There's no guarantee that those are going to be available. We do our best, but I'll explain some reasons why that may or may not happen. But basically, you should hear from someone in my office by February 6th. And then from February 6th to the very end of the term next term, we are going to work with you and collaborate with you. Please communicate in a timely manner through your UMich, and we'll do the same to try to get you moving. And that's the entire placing cycle. So I don't want anyone to be nervous. If you're not placed within the first 2 weeks, it's totally normal. Lots of things come up and interview schedules and all the things. So that's kind of the entire placing cycle. And even if on April 24th, you have another interview because some other things didn't work out, it's not like April 24th is the absolute deadline for you. We will continue to work with you until we get you placed. We have placed everyone over all the semesters. It just sometimes takes us a little bit longer due to different circumstances. So that's kind of the placing timeline for spring, summer 26. Here's some things that you can start to prepare now. So I think this hopefully is helpful while you're preparing in this next term. One is re-review your technical standards and conduct policy. What we find is that you might be doing great in classes and also when the rubber hits the road, if you will, and you have to integrate a lot of these professional behaviors and standards into field, even if you have professional experience in other spaces, social work spaces are a little bit different. And this is why you're going to social work school. And so reading what our expectations are around your professionalism, communication, intellectual and cognitive skills, and emotional behavioral readiness, it just helps to give you a roadmap and helps to manage expectations because now you know the standard by which we're kind of holding you to. And so I would just encourage you, I know we asked you to sign off on this when you first got admitted here, but it might be a good opportunity to re-review that as you prepare for field. Prepare your resume. So I'm going to say these 2 slides and then I'm going to defer to my colleague in a quick second. So resume, just make sure that I'll say from my perspective, having been on the other end, please use your UMISH email because that's the one that I'm going to be using all the time. So we really encourage you to modify your resume to do that. And then we've hyperlinked things on the career services around resume. And then I'm just going to say goal statement real quick, Michelle, and then I'll turn it over to you. There's this goal statement that we also want you to write. This is a good writing sample for your prospective agencies. It's 1 to 2 pages. It's a written statement. We have guidelines for you that's written out here. It's not meant to be a cover page, a cover letter though. It's really meant, think of it as like a writing sample. And here's some just suggestions that I would float out there that I've told other folks. Don't be so specific. When you read kind of your field choices and you're going to rank a few, don't write it like a cover letter because what's going to happen is if the first one doesn't work out, you don't want to have to keep re-revising it every single time. You want it to be general enough that you can send it, but it gets across kind of what you're looking for, what skills of value add you might have. But it shouldn't be so specific to an agency. And then we have some writing support. So with that, I'm going to pause and turn it over to my colleague.
Sure. So in terms of your resume, if you have a really good resume that you've worked with in the past, you can still use that resume for your application for field. There isn't a specific type of resume that the agencies are looking for. For example, agencies don't prefer a functional resume over a chronological resume. So you don't have to worry about if there's a specific format that you need to submit. The best thing to keep in mind is just to make sure that you have a resume that's easy to read, that has headings that make sense regarding the type of experiences that you have. So if you have social work related experience, or you have paid work experience or volunteer experience, that those headings are distinctive and that when the employer or and site looks at the heading and they look at the jobs or experiences up under them, that they make sense. And with the education section, you want to make sure that you have your UMISH education, your information about our school social work, your pathway at the top, because sometimes your resume might end up getting separated from your goal statement, for instance, and that they may be reviewing more than one offer from students at other social work programs. So you want to make sure that it just has your updated school and information on there, but there isn't a specific type of resume that you have to submit. On our website, we do have some examples that kind of help you. So if you want some general guidelines on updating your resume and what to add, we do have some templates and some examples of how to create good bullet points or how to space your headings. And so those are the resume guidelines. So if you want to use those, that is for you as a guideline, but you'll have to totally redo a resume that you feel really good about if it has clear, distinctive headings and information about your current experiences and your past experiences. And in terms of your goal statement and resume, in both of these documents, we can review those prior to submission to the field office. And you just want to give us a couple of days in advance. So if you have, there's that target of dates that Aaron listed as when you can begin applying and when the absolute end date is. You give us a couple of days prior to when you want to submit your materials, that gives us enough time to review them and get them back to you. So you don't want to wait to the last day and ask us to review them, because then we won't have enough time to get back to you regarding any type of revisions or suggested additions that you want to have for your resume. And you can email your resume and your goal statement directly to us. And it's the CSO is ssw-cso@umich.edu. And we will take a look at your documents. And it's helpful to send them to us as a non-PDF. So it can be a Word document. Thank you for adding that. It can be a Word document, but not a PDF, because it's hard for us to make any type of suggested comments on the document if it's a PDF. So your goal statement is 1 to 2 pages. And there are specific information that the field office wants you to discuss in your goal statement. So the first thing is, what type of career goal do you have? When you leave the program, is there a specific type of position that you're interested in, or career that you want to have within the field social work? You want to designate what your interest is in terms of what your goal is when you finish the program, and how that relates to what type of field placement that you want. So what is your pathway choice? How does that relate to your career goals? And then they want to know what type of skills do you want to develop while you're in your field placement. And you want to think most, in general about what skills. And helpful suggestion or resource for you on our website, we have all the pathways listed, and they have competencies. Each pathway has information about what skills you learn within that pathway. It also has the competencies that you will learn in that pathway, and suggested type of positions that our graduates have gotten in that pathway. So those are kind of some helpful resources to get you thinking. If you're kind of stuck on what to write, that can get you thinking about what are some of the options out there for you. And when you talk about what skills you want to develop in your field placement, that helps your potential field site think about the skills that you can learn there. And that's what you really want to focus on, is your skill development. Not only are you going to focus on that within your field placement, but your field placement is to help you get your job as well. And so the skill development, that's what employers are going to ask you about. What skills did you develop in your field placement and in your classroom? And so you want to tie that into what you're looking for in your goal statement. And it's also helpful for the field office and the site to have an idea, not drawn in on a very narrow, specific setting, because there are a lot of skills that you can develop in many different settings. So you want to make sure that that you have skills that are broad enough that can be applied to different settings that you may be interested in, because the field office is going to also ask you to pick a couple of different settings of interest to you. And so you'll want to make sure that the skills that you're interested in can be achieved at the different settings. And so I think they have you choose about 3 different types of organizations. And so you'll want your skills to be able to be applied to all those different settings that might be of interest to you. The other is in terms of your background. A lot of the potential field sites want to know a little bit about you. You're going to come in with different experiences, some that are more social work related, some that are transferable. And so they want to get an idea of what type of skills that you have transferable. And it could be a wide variety. It doesn't have to be direct social work skills in order to be transferable skills for a field placement site. For instance, we've had individuals who have experience in customer service, and they are able to talk about engagement, working with different populations, being adaptable and flexible with working in high traffic environments with many different people. Those are transferable skills that the potential field site would be interested in knowing about you. So you want to think about that, what your background is and what you think that a potential field placement site may find interesting about you as it relates to your career goals. So we can always help you with that if you're stuck on that with our career services office. But in general, you want to think about that. And one of there are several things that get students kind of stalled at producing their goal statement. And I wanted to bring those to your attention. One is taking your application, your essay that you use for your application, and trying to plug that in as your goal statement. That is not going to work. You have to adjust it a lot. And so you don't want to, we can really tell if you just tried to plug that in without adjusting it. And so you may be able to use that as kind of a beginning of thinking about what you're interested in terms of your pathway, but you really want to change and detail it towards what skills you want to develop in the program and what your overall career goals are in your background. So just don't plug in your essay from your application. The other is using ChatGPT. I know that is out there, and it can be useful in getting you unstuck. But you want to make sure that if you do use ChatGPT, that you modify it to your voice, because we can also tell when that's used and it hasn't been changed. So you want to be mindful of that. The other is a goal statement that is very narrow. I know that sometimes you have an idea of what you're interested in, and it may be very specific because that might your area of population that you want to work with or what you want to do in the field of social work, maybe based on very unique experiences that you have in your background. And so you want to work in the same area, but sometimes that is not as helpful in terms of the placement process because the field office is not able to use a very specific and narrow goal statement to some of the field placement options that may be available to you. And then sometimes you may end up placing yourself out of very interesting and unique experiences. And so you'll want to make sure that your skills are a little bit broader and that your goal statement isn't very narrowly focused. But if you give us a couple of days in terms of requesting a review, we can always talk you through it if you're stuck, and give you suggestions for writing the best resume and goal statement for your field placement choices. And also, I forgot to add that in terms of licensure, sometimes there are specific states that require a specific type of field placement. For instance, Florida wants you to have a direct services field placement, and that's pretty broad. So you don't have to get very narrow in your choice in terms of your agency that you are picking. You just want to make sure it's direct services. So if there are nuances to different state licensing requirements that you need, you also want to make sure that you are taking that in consideration when you are filling out your documents for your field placement. And I can kind of help you through that if you have questions regarding that. Any questions about goal statement and resume before me? Okay.
Michelle, I think there's a question just about CV versus resume. Do you have any guidance?
Oh, yeah, yeah. So that's a good question. So the uh, agencies want a resume versus a CV. So a CV is typically used for scholarships, fellowships, and also for more positions that are in the academic setting, like universities and colleges. Our field placement sites are mostly kind of employer type settings where they're used to resumes versus CVs. So you'll want to have a resume, not a CV. And a CV is also a document that could be about 20 pages long, and a resume is usually a shorter version of your experiences, 1 to 2 pages, maybe 3 pages. And so that is what the field placement sites are expecting, not a 20-page document.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. If anybody has questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We definitely can try to answer them. And like I said, there'll be Q&A at the end as well. Thank you so much for all that. All right, along the same lines of just preparing. So we're preparing you for field. The next thing I wanted to share is about planning your schedule. So this is going to be really critical to your success because you're going to be taking classes. You have your own personal obligations. We want you to have time to take care of yourselves, of course, because this is a social work program. Now is the time to start to think about the following. How are you going to fit in 2 to 3 days of field in addition to the classes that you're taking, in addition to if you have a part-time job or a full-time job now? For full-time students, we strongly recommend you not have a full-time job. It is untenable. We've had students who try, and it is very, very difficult. And they end up, many students find it, again, to be untenable. And we have to have some conversations about something has to kind of change. So on these meetings, now is the time for me to encourage you all to sit down and literally come up with a schedule. If you were to take full-time or part-time classes, about how many credit hours you're taking, think about your own personal obligations and what that looks like, and how would you fit in 2 days and or 3 days of field, depending on where you are in field. And again, for some of you, it might start out 2 days and then go to 3 days. For some of you, it'll stay 2 days for part-time all the way around. But how will you fit that in normal business hours? Our field placements are during Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 p.m. typically. There are some very few exceptions, but I will tell you those are quite the exception and not the rule, particularly in this current environment of agencies shifting and funding changes and staffing changes. So please plan to complete field during normal business hours. And again, now is kind of the time to start thinking about adjustments. You may need to adjust any caregiving plans that you may have, which we've heard from students as well, any dependent care needs that you have to take care of. And then to start thinking about your transportation needs or plans. We certainly have on the field application opportunity for you to check that you have no car, but that will severely limit your opportunities, as you can imagine, for where you can complete your field placement then on campus. And so the expectation is that you be ready to travel anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes, sometimes upwards of an hour. We have many placements in Detroit. We have some scholarship programs that actually require you to be in the Detroit area. And so that can determine how far you need to drive one way. And so now is also the time to think about transportation. You can take advantage of some public transportation, but if you're not from Michigan, we don't have the best public transportation system everywhere. And so again, there are some public transportation options in Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti. The further out you get, a little more challenging it gets. Some students have carpooled together, so that's been also one way that some folks have decreased the cost overall. And so just something to start thinking about now for y'all. Okay, employment-based placements, I'm going to just touch upon briefly. Some of you may already be working in placement sites, nonprofit agencies, social service agencies, some healthcare facilities. It's not an exhaustive list, but some of the work that you're doing and or your supervisor or your organization may support you in doing your field placement at your place of work. And it needs to be fully vetted, but there is an opportunity potentially for you to do that. The bottom line is there's kind of main things that you need to make sure that you can complete or satisfy under these conditions. One, you may, well, I hyperlinked the webinar there, so you can look a little bit more in depth, but really the major requirements are listed here. You have to be employed at the time that you apply for field applications. Sometimes I get folks that say, hey, I have an offer or I'm applying right now. Can we just wait and see? Unfortunately, that's not the case. We can't wait for, and then you have your probationary period. You have to be employed at the time that you apply for field. Your proposed employment-based placement must meet both your pathway requirements that you choose and also the CSWE competencies. So if you think about the work that you're doing already, if you're already doing it well and you don't need an MSW degree, those things likely will not count. You need to elevate the things that you're doing, or sometimes certain supervisors will allow you to go to a different area of your organization to complete your field hours. So let's say you work in operations, but in another department, they're doing case management services. They will kind of release or work with you, release you for those hours, or allow you to add extra hours in different times to work in that other department and satisfy your field placement hours. That's worked out well for some folks. Your agency obviously has to support this process, and there's a whole approval process. They must be willing to support the number of total field hours that are required. And then the other requirement is that they have what we call a qualified MSW or field instructor on site. And there's some requirements and rules around that. Watch the webinar. I would say if you're currently employed and interested in employment-based placement, watch that webinar and then let us know if you have any questions after you review that. Okay. When my office sends you that email about the online field application, you will get a link and you will click on it. And what does that mean? So the very first question that you're going to get for the field application is whether you're interested in an EBP or an employment-based placement or not, because that really dictates the workflow of the information we need from y'all. And so if you are interested in pursuing an employment-based placement, again, it'll take you on one route. For those that are not pursuing an EBP, this is the vast majority of our students. You're going to be asked to look through this whole long list of different agencies that at the time that we asked them, they said they were willing to take X amount of students in the spring summer term. And so I'm going to tell you some factors that impact that by the time you see the application, because it's a very dynamic process. But at the best information that we go off of, we're providing you a list that's very subspecialized for the spring summer 26 term, and you will look through that entire list, and then you're going to be asked to rank order those agencies, and you're going to have you choose up to 3. There are some filters that are available in our field application, but I would tell you, to be honest, my recommendation is first to look through all the agencies unfiltered first, and then you might want to filter by pathway. If you have too many filters on, it really limits your visibility of what you can see, and sometimes you may kind of lose out on an opportunity because you had some filters set. So I would encourage you not to do that. After you rank your top 3, and again, this is a non-employment-based placement situation, after you rank those, and I talked about these filters, we recommend that you really be as open as possible, and Director Wood shared this as well, again, our goal is transferable skills. You're not going to get the exact field placement of the first job that you're anticipating to get post MSW. That's not the goal here. The goal is to get you the skills that align with your pathway, that satisfy the competencies, and again, get you all these transferable skills. Many of us who did our field placements, myself included, we are not in jobs that are even remotely close to our field placements. And yet I would argue that I learned a lot from my first field placement in hospice. And again, I'm more in a teaching administrative role at this point. So again, the students who have the best experience are ones who are really open to possibilities and open to varied kind of experiences in the social work space. After you apply, what happens? So basically the applications, your applications are reviewed, your goal statements are reviewed, your resumes are looked over by the field faculty. Every once in a while, field faculty may reach out to you individually and say, hey, I read your goal statement, and I'm just based on who you rank, because they know the agencies really well. You might want to consider adding or editing or changing part of this to make you a more viable candidate. And so they give you some suggestions on that space. And so what we'll do is then review those and send you off. The goal is, again, to send you off to a first option at least to offer an interview by February 6th. I hyperlinked something online that helps you prepare for interviews. I'll just say, as a first gen student, I didn't know any of this before I started school. And so some of these kind of helpful tips on how to show up in certain spaces, how to interview, how to dress. Like I didn't have anyone who's walking me through that. So we're trying to be transparent with as much information as we can to help support students. And so feel free to click on that and ask us if you have any other questions as you review that. If you get an interview offer, awesome. Proceed with the interview. Let your field faculty know you're going to proceed with the process. If the agency declines, or for whatever reason you decline after you're offered an interview, we're just going to keep going down the list of viable options that have an available spot. And it's, like I said, really dynamic. And I'm going to share some examples of why. But we'll continue to have you interview until you land somewhere, and then we will confirm the placement. Once you're confirmed post-interview, congratulations. We'll walk you through on when your first day is for the spring summer term. If for whatever reason you're not offered, and it could be it's just a really competitive space, it could be that, your interview was a little off that day, or you're not used to interviewing in that type of business sector, and that's okay. We do ask them for feedback to give to you because we always feel like this is a teachable moment, and we'll give you that feedback and try to coach and support you through the next interview. And then we'll kind of move on. So that's just kind of the process, and we'll continue to go through that process the entire term until we finally get you placed. One of the things that we really ask is that you not reach out to agencies directly. And the reason for that is we have to have these legal affiliation agreements and contracts with these agencies that really outline our expectations and liability concerns and expectations on our end, non-discrimination clauses. And it also is important that we have a very specific approach to curating relationships with our community partners. And so because you're just not aware of all the ins and outs and all the things around the legalities and liabilities, we really prefer to be the person that's contacting and being the main contact. If you have a suggestion on an agency, though, I'm always open to taking those suggestions. But I will tell you that we have sufficient amount typically of agencies by time you go to apply that we don't have the capacity or ability, because you'll be behind, to open up a brand new agency at the start of winter term, because we're already in the placing season. So that's just something to consider, is if you have a suggestion like right now, I will take them. I can't guarantee that they'll be open by time your field applications will be open because of the holidays and all of that. But we have plenty of agencies that we've already affiliated with, and that's kind of the pool from which you will kind of select from. Here are those considerations that I was alluding to. So the agencies themselves will tell us many, many months ahead, yes, I'm interested in taking this many students for this term specifically. And so we curate, if you look at, we have over 1,500 agencies across 36 states plus Washington, D.C. Administratively, we're managing quite a lot of volume. For this term, for winter term, just to give you an example, we're placing close to 300 students here in this fall term for winter term. And so when you think about all the things, and then you think about the world and everything that's happening, people are losing funding, there's some staffing changes, there's productivity changes. Even though they express that they'd be willing to take a student in the spring summer term, sometimes we find out that by the time we reach out to them and say, hey, we have this amazing student, would you be willing to interview? And they say, I'm so sorry, we thought we could take 3 students, but now we can't take any. Or we can only take 1 student because the field instructors that we had left, or they're on medical leave themselves, or our funding shifted. So please bear with us and the agencies, that you can understand that social service and, again, social work is very ever-changing. And so these things kind of matter. When you rank these things, we'll come back and let you know whether they're available or not. But the agency availability is a big factor. The training program cycle. So some students come to me and say, well, I know for certain that so-and-so takes students, like fill in the blank agency. And sometimes what happens, though, is they want to do a centralized onboarding, and they will only take students, let's say, in the fall term. And your cohort is starting in the spring summer term. And so your choice, if that's the only place that's the place that you really want to try for, even though there's no guarantee, you may need to come back to the school and ask to start field late. But if that happens, again, that may have implications on your graduation date, and may have financial aid implications. And so we just want to be really transparent about that. I mentioned some of these other things listed here. So again, those are all the things that we're working with agencies. As far as for students, you all may want to consider agencies that are listed, who they're like what type of work it is and what track you are. So one thing I want to be really clear about is for school-based placements, those are typically reserved, and I would strongly recommend you have to switch to being a 20-month student. Because if you think about it, schools end in June. And so for those, in particular, your class who's starting in the spring summer term, schools are out. And so that's why we don't have students on a 16-month schedule or a continuous schedule in school-based placements, because there's just not enough field hours for y'all to do. Now, on the flip side, I will say there's some 20-month students. You come in as 20-month students, let's say, and then you want to do specifically interpersonal practice in hospital settings, or let's say psychotherapy in private practices. They don't want you to take a break for patient continuity, right? For client continuity. So if you were to start and then take a break, they don't want to entertain that, because again, that's not the best for their clients. And so they refuse to take students who will take a break. They will only take students who are continuous. And so for those of you starting in spring, summer, that really shouldn't be a problem, because you're continuous and you're continuing on. But I just wanted to call out the school-based kind of placements specifically for your group. Your availability matters, so just making sure that, again, those considerations that I mentioned before, transportation is a consideration, your pathway. I will say, generally speaking, we have probably more agencies in the macro space than students, because just of the ratio. But we have plenty of agencies for all pathways. And again, we've always placed all our students. Your related experience and professionalism may also play a factor. And I've seen it played both ways. Some folks have a ton of experience in a certain kind of social service space, I'll say, or a social justice adjacent space. And they're like, I know this is what I want to do, and that's all I want to do. That drives them to only go towards certain field placements. Other folks will do the opposite and say, I've had all this experience. I actually don't want this. I want something opposite. Again, my hope is that you would just be open to whatever sector that is, or whatever kind of field placement that you're hoping to get. Because if you think about the more restrictions that you put on yourself, the harder it's going to be to land a field placement on time. So if you only want a field placement that starts with the letter B, that's only in the city of Ann Arbor, that only deals with children between the ages of 10 and 11. And I'm being overly, specific on purpose to be exaggerating. But if you think about it, you start really here in the filter, and it keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And by the end, we have no field placement options for you. And so I would recommend strongly, for your own frustration levels, is that you kind of take a wider look and kind of be open to kind of those possibilities. If you are not offered a placement, we will work with you. Again, just noting that even though you're ranking these choices, you're giving us an idea of what type of placements you want, but I cannot guarantee that any of those will work. We will work through the list. We will see what the agency's availability are. We'll see how you interview. We'll see their receptivity and the size, but we'll just keep going through different placements after that to get you placed. Your field faculty will give you feedback during that time period, and then we'll offer you support, and then we'll kind of move on in that space. If for whatever reason your 3 are not viable, or for whatever reason they don't work, just know that we crowdsource it then for the entire field team. We come back in a weekly meeting throughout the entire semester, and we work together to find the next opportunity for you. So just check your emails. The bottom line for that is we'll send all this information in emails. So just make sure that you're responding within 24 to 48 business hours. If for whatever reason, though, and I just shared this very briefly, is if we give you 2 viable options that align with your pathway and you refuse those, we feel like that is maybe stalling the process and kind of impeding the timeline. It just requires you to have a conversation with myself or the assistant directors to see, like, what are the barriers? Like, what's happening? We've offered you 2 and it's not working. We don't want to keep offering you things that you don't want, but also we want to get you placed, which hopefully is your shared goal. And so that may require just a meeting with us. Travel considerations. So local options, as I mentioned, are within an hour of Ann Arbor. Think about Ypsilanti, Ann Arbor, Dexter, Chelsea, but all the way up through Detroit. Most students travel, so please plan accordingly. You're responsible for that transportation. And I mentioned this, if you don't have a car, you can just check that on the field application, and we can share with you what kind of more local options there are, and we can work with you there. Disability accommodations, and we just have a few more slides, and then I promise we'll get to the Q&A. We take this very seriously. We want to make sure that if you have any accommodations that you're currently receiving in classes, if there's anything that we can do to transfer or translate any of those in field, we're super open to having conversations about that. You do not have to disclose your diagnoses, of course. We keep all that confidential. We connect you to the Students Office for Students with Disabilities, but we do have a subject matter expert on our team who helps talk with you about kind of, again, accommodations in field, and if there's anything else that we could do in that space. Once you are placed, These are the things that we want you to think about. We have a website about preparing to start field. So this is, again, once you're placed, congratulations, you have a field placement. There is a article here about being joyous and bringing kind of your full self to field. So we include that. And then we would just say check in with your field agency. So there might be some health screenings, drug testing, background checks. If we're aware that those prerequisites are required, it's actually on your field application and you have to attest that you know you have to do that. For some people, you might not want to do that. If you're like, I don't want to do a health screening, I don't want to go through a background check, that's okay. If we're aware of it, we'll share that with you in the application. But if for whatever reason the organization's policies change, we may not know 100%, but we try to relay that to you if we know about it. Please ensure you're checking your UMich email. I can't say that enough because I do have some students that we lose contact and they're like, well, I was only checking my other Gmail. And I was like, well, everything's going to your UMich. So please just make sure you check that. And then you will receive an email once you're placed for something called a pre-field orientation, and that will be at the beginning of spring summer term. And think of that literally as your field orientation meeting. How do you do your educational agreement? Who your field faculty is? So that will be at the beginning of your spring summer term. Really quickly, some people have questions about school social work specialization. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I include these slides because a lot of people sometimes have questions. There are certain classes that you have to take, and you have to complete 500 hours of direct practice with children and youth. And so that may be a factor in the field placement that you choose if you're trying to also get a school social work certificate. So we'll work with you. We've integrated some processes in here, but just know that school social work will be very, very difficult for this class who's starting spring summer. But if you want a school social work certificate, you absolutely can find another field placement that works with children and youth, 500 hours, you still can get your certificate. So it's not limiting you. It's just that it may not be in a school proper, but there's school adjacent things, there are intermediate school districts sometimes that are through the summer. So there's lots of options. We've placed students in child and adolescent psychiatry. Like there's lots of other opportunities that interact with kids. Here's the approval process that honestly you don't have to worry about till later, but we include it here up front for you here. Here are some hyperlinks for school social work resources around the forms and all the things. And then here is our faculty lead. So you also can reach out to any of these amazing folks and you can ask all the questions around the school social work certification or specialization certificate if you want that. These are some additional resources and websites. Again, I'm not going to talk through this too much. International students, I'll just highlight. You will need something called a CPT letter every term. So our office works with the International Center. So we're very familiar with that. And your field placement, that CPT letter has to be in place before you start your field placement. So we will work with you on that. Director Woods is on here, but licensing and career planning and some other things. We put the email in the chat, but it's listed here as well. And we have made it to the final thank you slide. So this is my thank you so much. Let me just pause before we do Q&A though, and invite my colleague, Cerise. Cerise, is there anything from your perspective from financial that you'd like to share?
I think for me, just the biggest question that our office tends to get is how do I support myself, kind of transportation wise and cost wise, traveling to and from field. And so as Director Kong mentioned, it is a student's responsibility to cover the costs of their travel to and from field placement. So, for instance, if you decide to accept a field placement an hour away, you're committing, to those transportation costs. I do also want to acknowledge that within the cost of attendance for the university, there is a travel budget built in. So you are welcome to utilize any of your financial aid refund that you possibly are receiving to cover the costs of your transportation. If you need to secure additional funding via loans, that can be used to cover your costs of transportation. Within the Office of Student Services and Enrollment Management, every semester we have made available a field stipend application that any student in that particular semester can apply for this stipend. It's usually around $500 that is available per student, keeping in mind that we don't have enough money to support every student that applies. So we are considering those students that present with the highest amount of financial need and that also have the greatest field expenses. So, comparing a student that might only be traveling 10 miles to and from field placement versus a student that's having to travel 90 miles to and from field placement. We think about students who sometimes have to use their own vehicle to get to different locations. So if you're conducting home visits or having to travel to different school sites, for instance, those are things that we greatly consider. Some students have to pay for parking, while they're at their field placement. So those are some of the things that we also think of as it relates to just the greatest financial need. So keep that in mind as well, and just be on the lookout via your email once that application becomes available. You are welcome to apply every single semester that you're in field. So just because you receive the stipend for one semester does not mean you can't apply in the following semester, or just because you don't receive it in one semester doesn't mean you can't reapply for the following semester. So
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Okay, I know we've been answering chats. I'm going to stop the recording now and then we'll just open up for Q&A. Thanks everybody for joining.